So I began my journey of, trying to be like a better person. With like watching a lot of these like kind of self-improvement, like gurus, like YouTubers. The main one, I watched multiple of them. The main one that I've watched would have been like Hamza. And don't get me wrong, like he's definitely, he had some good videos, he has good tips, all of that, okay? But the two problems is one, he's not focused on the Lord, okay? He's just focused on material things. And but the second point kind of stems from that. He thinks that you just need to walk constantly, okay? Like constantly walking, no days off, you know, 8 hour days, 12-hour days, whatever. Constantly walking, okay? And today, I'm going to be kind of answering, okay, is that what we're supposed to do? Are we supposed to be walking constantly? Or are we just kind of coping? Or is just us trying to get rich? So that's basically what this video is going to be for. Hi, my name is Noah Lindsay. I am the founder of Purpose Ministries. Okay, so this video is going to be into 3 different sections. Okay, and the first section we're going to be talking about the Sabbath. Now, this is definitely something that a lot of people just try to ignore, but the Sabbath is very important. In the Old Testament especially, it talks about how important the Sabbath is. Okay, so that's going to be our first point. In Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 to 10, it says, "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy." It's even one of the 10 commandments, okay? You got to keep the Sabbath holy. So it starts out, "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all of your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God." Now, something interesting here, like I said, it says 6 days, okay? So that's already giving us a little bit of, like meat to work on, okay? 6 days. So we already know that one day has to be the Sabbath. Now, this day has been kind of, like debated upon. A lot of people just do it on Sundays because, that's when you're going to church, you're getting in, like that Christian kind of mood. But it kind of, I think you can make any day your Sabbath, okay? As long as you have one day every week, that's your Sabbath, okay? So, and this doesn't mean do absolutely nothing. It just means don't walk. Don't labor, okay? So you just choose one day, because it's like, if you work at a church or something, you're going to be working all of Sunday. In some jobs you may have to work Sundays. So maybe you have to take Friday or Tuesday as your day off, your Sabbath, okay? So as long as you just have one. So we just need to basically keep the Sabbath as holy as possible, no work. Just kind of reflecting on the week, playing about the next week, kind of reflecting on what happened, okay? And, how we can improve on that. And just basically the crux of it is just following God and just focus on Him, okay? So, you can kind of just choose what the Sabbath. If you work just a normal job 5 days a week, just make it Sunday. Like, unless you really can't, I think it just makes sense for it to be Sunday, like, if you're able to, just make it Sunday. So, again, what you can do on the Sabbath, just don't walk. Don't put your body through labor. So you can, like, maybe practice hobbies. It's a good time to say, you want to have, like, a game night with your family, or you want to go with your buddies to, a park and just kind of have fun. Just do stuff like that. Just recreation stuff. As long as you're not walking, you're good. And of course, nothing stupid either. Don't take it as a night to do, just like sort of drinking. Don't do that, I shouldn't have to say that, but I'm sure there's some people that are going to think like that. Okay, so the second point is how you should walk. Okay, so we kind of have an idea of, what we need to walk on. Okay, or what days we need to walk on. But now we need to know, okay, how do we walk? Okay, so Colossians chapter 3, verses 23 to 24 says, "Whatever you do, walk it with all of your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters." Okay, so I'm sure if you were raised Christian, I'm sure your parents have told you this verse. Oh, do your chores like you're doing it for the Lord. Do your homework like you're doing it for the Lord. Make me some food like you're doing it for the Lord. Just like, all that stuff. And, it is a good verse, right? So you need to think of God basically as your boss. It says, whatever you do, work it with all of your heart, okay? Because you are working it for the Lord. If you are working and your boss is sitting right there, you are going to work at max efficiency. You're going to be working as hard as you can because you don't want to get fired. You don't want the big man himself to get mad at you, right? So you need to just always imagine God as being a boss and he's sitting right there because he is. He's always there. He's always watching. Okay? Sounds a little bit flaky, but yeah, he's always there. He knows everything you do. It's kind of like, there's this quote, I forget who it's by, but it's like something along the lines of, you need to talk to people like if Jesus was an earshot away from you. It's kind of that idea. Like, you need to walk like Jesus is in the other room and he could walk in at any moment. Okay? So, and then the end of the verse goes, not for human masters, but, for God. Okay? So, we don't want to be working for humans. Sure, if you have a boss, you are working for a human, but you need to act like you're working just for God. Because God, he calls us men to work. Okay? So, we need to be working for God, not for humans. We don't, we need to be working if your boss is around, or if your boss isn't around. You should be working the exact same. We don't need to be, trying to impress our bosses, impress our co-workers, our family, friends, mentors, whatever. We don't need to be doing that. We need to just be walking like God's always watching, because he is. Alright? So just, no matter what you're doing, you should just be walking the same. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 23 says, all hard work brings a profit, all of it. But mere talk leads only to poverty. So, obviously, hard work pays off. And of course you've heard that before. Your dad, talks about it. Your mom talks about it. Everyone talks about, hard work pays off. It's kind of like the classic saying, if you're going to do it, you got to do it right. Always work hard, always do it right, all of that. Okay, but it's also talking about don't just talk. A lot of, people, they talk about, I'm gonna work 16 hours days. I'm gonna be working all of the time. But then, realistically, they're only working an hour a day, or 2 hours a day, or a few hours a week. Okay? So it's saying, this verse is saying, but mere talk only leads to poverty. But if you work hard, there will be a profit. Okay, there will be a profit. It's kind of like the parable with the tablets. Hopefully I don't butcher this up. But it's like Jesus, he was telling a parable about a king and then 3 servants. And he gives all of them a tablet. One of them, he gets another tablet, okay? So he's coming back with 2. The other one, he I think he gets 3 or 4, so he's tripled it or something. But then the last guy, he just hid it. So he didn't lose it. And then a week later or whatever, the king's like, okay, what happened to the tablets? The first guy's like, oh, I have 2 tablets now. And the king's like, good job. Nice one. Then the second one's like, oh my gosh, I got 4 tablets. The king is hyping him up. He's like, yo, nice job, man. Proud of you. And then the last guy comes in, oh, king, I hope you're happy because, I saved the tablet you got me. And then the king just gets pissed off. He's like, but I gave you a tablet. That's all you did with it? Okay? These 2 false guys, they worked hard, and then, the fruits of the labor showed. They got more. But this last guy, he just hid it and just pretended like it wasn't there until the king called for it. Okay? So this is kind of representation of how important hard work is. Okay. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 10 says, "For even when we were with you, we gave you this rule. The one who is unwilling to work shall not eat." So that's a rough one, right? It's a little bit rough, but if you don't work, you shall not eat. Now, this is kind of tough because a lot of people, they're probably thinking about the verse in Matthew. I don't know what verse it was, but it's like talking about, oh, if God provides for the birds, then why wouldn't He provide for you, His most beloved creature? And that is true, okay? But God sees that your effort. You need to at least be trying, okay? If we don't even try, God's not going to provide. God loves us, sure, but He doesn't want us just laying on our couch every day and being like, oh, guys, don't worry. God's going to provide. If He provides for the birds, of course He's going to provide for me. No, God knows if you're trying. Okay, so you need to at least try. Even if you're not doing a good job, at least try as hard as you possibly can, okay? We must try or we don't eat. That's a fun verse right there. Okay? Now the third point is balance and priorities. Escalations chapter 3 verse 1 says, "There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens." So we live, I'm sure you've heard of this, but we live our lives in seasons, okay? One season may be for money. We're a single guy. We're a single woman, okay? And, we don't really have anything on our plate, so, but we want to have a family, so we may provide, or we may work a lot, we may have to be working, 14-hour days. So you can get that income, so when you find a woman, get married, you have kids, you don't have to work as much. So you can actually spend more time with your kids. Okay? But then you might have a season where you're married. And then you have to focus more on your kids. So you can't be working, all day, every day. So, again, your life is kind of in seasons. Okay? We need to provide, especially as men. Okay? But if we spend too much time on anything, this could go off, in so many places. If we're walking too much, if we're spending too much time with even our family. If we spend too much time doing anything, we all are going to be headed for trouble. Okay? Proverbs chapter 3, verse 4 says, "Do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust your own cleverness." So, like I mentioned before, we need to be working hard, but we should not be wearing ourselves out. Okay, don't wear yourself out to get rich. You can, strive to be rich, but that should not be your main focus. Okay, you should most definitely not be wearing yourself out just to get rich, because riches are just of this earth. It's not as important as you think. It's not as important as it may seem. Okay, a lot of times it is kind of hard to focus on heavenly things because we can't see them. Of course, we have God, we have Jesus, but we can't really see what's going to go on in heaven. Okay, so I definitely get it. It's definitely hard, but being rich is just it's nice. It's a luxury, but it's just not necessary. And that's when I have to deal with as well. I'm most definitely guilty. I'm not perfect, obviously. But if you are walking a lot more than you need to, then that's greed. It's plain and simple. That is greed. If you're walking a little bit more, if you only need to walk 8 hours a day and you're walking 10 hours a day, that's not a big deal. Okay, you may need to get a car. You may want to buy a friend something. You might want to buy a family member something. That's fine. Okay, no problem with that. But if you're walking way more than you need to, if you only need to be working 8 hours a day and you're working 16 hours a day, that's greed. And if you are doing that and you have greed, yeah, you need to be searching your heart. Like, I don't mean to be the veil of bad news, but you need to search your heart. You need to be talking to your friends, your family, maybe even mentors, because that is something that is just it's not important. And this society tries saying, "Oh, you're an independent man. Oh, you're just walking. Good job." And again, walking is important. You need to work for your friends. You need to work for your family. You need to work for God. Okay, but if you're walking that much, then that is greed. Going back to the Matthew verse, if God will provide for you, okay, He will provide. So why do you work way more than you need to? Only work what you need to, and maybe a little bit more at times, okay? Just like what we were speaking about earlier. There might be a season where you do need to work a bit more. So you can ensure that you're providing, okay? But you should not be working way more than you need to. All right? It's a tough truth, but it's something you definitely need to swallow, because greed is just like one of those sins that a lot of times you don't even realize you're doing. Like a lot of times you don't realize you're being greedy, just thinking, oh, I want to provide for my parents. I want to retire my parents early. I want to put them on a yacht, which is cool and all. Like there's nothing sinful about wanting to provide for your parents, and retire them. Like that's a great thing. But if you're doing it at the expense of your life, your faithfulness to God, your family, then your mental health, then it's like, no. You should not overwork yourself. Okay? So, now, this is like the answer of the video. Work-life balance, what does the Bible say about it? Is it true, is it not? The answer to the question is basically to work hard as much as you need, maybe a little bit more, but not overworking. So, work as much as you need to. Maybe, or like we were talking about in the beginning of the video, work like 6 days a week. Okay? But do not be overworking yourself. You still need to set time aside for, of course, God, Jesus, You need to set some time for family, okay? But you do need to be working. I didn't put this verse in, but there's also a verse. I want to, I'm not going to say what I think it is, because I'm probably going to be wrong. But it says, if a man doesn't provide for his own, then he is worse than an unbeliever. So, of course, the Bible is very clear that men need to be working a lot, but just not overworking. If you're working more than you need to every day, then you're probably doing something wrong. Alright? So, work 6 days. And, this may not all be on the work side as well. Some jobs you only be working 4 or 5 days, okay? But on that 6th day, just do stuff around the house. I'm sure your wife has a list of things you can do around the house, okay? So work 6 days a week, and then, of course, keep the Sabbath holy. Alright? And work like you're working for God. Now, I'm going to have a little bonus point here. Focus on what matters. Okay? Matthew chapter 6, verse 33 says, "But seek his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you as well." Alright? Probably heard this verse before. But, we want to provide, especially as men. But we need to, keep the main thing, okay? Worshiping God every single day is way more important than getting all lapped up in work, all lapped up in, giving your family what they want. You need to keep the main thing. It's extremely important. And when we do, He will provide. The funny thing is, if I could work every day, 7 days a week for like 14 hours, right? And I'd be making a good amount of money. But if I work 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, or 5, 6 days a week, I would probably be making the same amount, if not even more, because God's providing for me. Because with the second option, doing what the Bible says, I'm on God's side. If you're working 7 days a week, you're not on God's side. You're not doing what God's telling you to. So why choose that option? Well, you're overworking yourself, you're stressing yourself out, your family is in a crisis because the father's not home. But you can be on God's side and make just as much, if not more. God will provide. He always has and he always will. Okay? Now, God providing may look different than what we think and what we want. But we just need to trust in God that he will provide. Because, he will. Alright? So, if you enjoyed this video, and you don't really know what being a real man for God is like, then click the video on the screen right now. So, like one of these, okay? So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Peace, guys.